Hey guys, it's Damp. We're going to talk a little bit today about some basic mechanics, and I'll be answering some questions that I get typically from newer players based around healing and who to take, what trinkets to take, why they're taking so much damage, etc., etc. So we'll start with the basic mechanics of damage and how you get damage. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you avoid it and then how you take care of it once you do have it. So basic damage in, let's say, a fight is going to primarily come from the third and fourth row, these two rows on your enemies. Primarily, you're going to be taking damage in the 1 and 2 slots, but also you can take some damage in the 3 and 4 slots. But as a healer, the guys in the first 2 rows are going to be the ones taking the damage. So as you look at your characters and who you typically would put there, when you first start in the game, you're probably going to think you need to have a tanky person in slot 1 or 2, or both. Not necessarily. This isn't a game where you really have to have tanks. You probably want to in your first few runs until you understand how the game works, but you don't necessarily have to have a tanky type person, whether it's a leper or a man-at-arms or a crusader. You don't necessarily have to have somebody like that in those first 2 slots, but you do have that option. Just because you have somebody there doesn't mean you're going to mitigate the damage, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to mitigate damage by using other people in those areas, other heroes in those areas. So in talking about basic combat mechanics, most of your damage or stress is going to come from rows 3 and 4. So the first step in mitigating damage is making sure you're taking care of those two lines first in combat, trying to target them and select them as best you can. In most situations, primarily that's where most of your damage is going to come from. A couple other ways you can mitigate damage is by bringing classes that are able to disable traps, because that's another big source of damage, or AoEs, such as blights or bleeds, come from traps. So bring somebody with a little bit higher trap percentage so they're able to take care of that damage before it even exists. Another source of damage that you can incur or completely just avoid is fights that you don't necessarily have to fight, but because you weren't able to scout ahead, you didn't have a scout chance that was good enough, you're not able to see or pick and choose your battles in your dungeon. So for example, if you were to bring a grave robber, you would be able to scout ahead more with her than, let's say, a crusader to know what's going to be coming ahead, so you might not even have to fight that fight if you don't want to. If you had an explore quest for 90% of the rooms, you could possibly avoid that fight altogether or go around it, thus allowing you to take 0 damage instead of taking the damage you would get in the fight. So as you're looking at damage, don't just consider damage in the fight, but rather how you can avoid it and be selective with the class composition you're taking in order to better mitigate that damage. So in getting to the fights themselves, you want to make sure that you can take somebody who can damage these back rows, because if you can't damage these back 2 rows, it's going to allow them to do more damage over time, and you're going to be trying to play catch-up. Or you want to make sure that you have somebody that can kill so quickly in the first 2 rows that they aren't really a factor, that they're not able to do their abilities because you've killed the first 2 rows so quickly. These characters here that need to be in slots 3 and 4 to do their damage are forced to move forward as you're clearing slots 1 and 2. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about how to heal damage once it happens. So you're obviously going to have your abilities. You're going to have your healing abilities that you can utilize in combat as a combat skill. But another way is just making sure that you're bringing enough band-aids and anti-venom, bandages rather, and anti-venom, just to make sure that you can take care of those. I usually bring between 2 and 4 just in case somebody does something stupid, they investigate something they probably shouldn't have, or they run into a trap, just so that it's not taking a combat turn away from me if I don't need it to. And also it would allow me to investigate certain curios with those abilities. So in speaking to that, another thing you want to make sure of is know what curios you're going to run into and know how to interact with them. Don't just blindly go through there and click on things and inspectigate them, so to speak, just to see what's going to be in there. Maybe there's a chance that you'll get some gold or something that could help you later on, and then you end up dying because that person gets a blight, a bleed, or just dies from investigating the wrong thing. So keep those couple pieces in mind. As you look at your actual combat skills that you're going to be utilizing, you have the Vestal as a hero class who can utilize these two, which are Divine Grace and Divine Comfort. Divine Comfort's your basic AoE. Divine Grace is your single target spell. So these guys are level 6. They're completely maxed out. So we're going to do kind of a little basic comparison between them. So maxed out, looking at the Vestal, he can heal 7 or 8. She rather can heal for 7 or 8 damage. Whereas she can do a complete AoE heal for 3 damage. So this is effectively doing maybe 12 damage heals, 12 heals rather, and this would heal for 7 or 8. As we look at the Occultist, they can heal anywhere between 0 and 18 for a single target heal, but their negative effect is, of course, whoever they try and heal has the chance to bleed for 3 rounds for 3 points of damage. So that could almost, let's say that completely balances out to where they heal for 18, but they bleed for 9 on max settings. How you can avoid this late game is by having this Cleansing Crystal, which reduces the bleed chance and will allow you to heal without having to worry too much about every time you heal somebody's going to bleed. It reduces that chance significantly as long as everybody's the same level. If they're lower level, they have a greater chance to bleed. So early in the game, the Occultist isn't nearly as good of an option as what the Vestal is, primarily for healing. Now, offensively, they're a little bit better of an option, but as we're just talking about healing, the Vestal's what you're primarily going to be using early game, just to keep it simple and make it easy on yourselves. So when you're looking for people to come off the stagecoach, you want to look for those that have both of these abilities to give you more options as far as a straight healer, because damage-wise, they aren't going to do a lot of damage, really, unless you're going to go after Undead with maybe Hand of Light or use Judgment, which is a pretty good spell because it can actually do damage and heal in return, heal the Vestal themselves. So, you know, as you're looking at her, you really want to concentrate early game on just understanding when to heal, how to heal, and as you begin to get trinkets, what trinkets to use to maximize on the healing. So that's what we'll go to now, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Early game, these are 2 common trinkets that you want to look for that will help increase your heals rather, and give you more of a chance of survivability. So the Youth Chalice is going to give you more HP and better prot, and again, you're going to see that it's going to take down your damage, but early on, you're really focused just on keeping everybody alive. And then you have the Tomb of Holy Healing, which will give you 20% increase to your heal skills. Again, you're taking less HP, and you're doing less damage, but again, you're really focusing on just trying to heal and keep everyone alive. Now, as you begin to progress, you get a few more options, and hopefully you'll run into this guy, which is a very rare scroll called the Sacred Scroll, which gives you 30% chance to heals, 20% stress heal while camping, and 20% stress resist in general. So this is very, very strong if you're able to find it early on in the game or as a quest reward. That's one that would be, look for this one because it's very, very useful to helping heal and sustaining your party. Going back to the Occultist is early in the game, you can utilize in a healing role, but also use them more offensively. So if you keep this Occultist in the 3rd slot here, it's able to use Sacrificial Stab, which has a really high crit chance and is able to do a lot of damage. So you could, for example, put the Occultist in the 3rd slot, leave a Jester in the 4th slot to buff and reduce some stress through increasing crit chances, things like that. And then when you need it, you could utilize the heal skill, but until you need the heal skill, you're going to use them offensively. So it's more of a utility role rather than just straight heal. That's how you would use it early on in the game. So that's kind of a brief overview on how you would use these guys just in a combat perspective, or just talking a little bit about how to mitigate damage. Don't think of in the game that you have to mitigate damage only through combat. Remember, there's other party members you can bring that will allow you to mitigate some of that damage by avoiding fights, disarming traps, doing the little things that can keep you alive. And will also help mitigate your stress. You know, if you're not in fights, you're not getting stressed, If you're not running into traps, you're not getting stressed. If you're not opening the wrong things like the wrong curios, you're not getting stressed, you're not taking damage. So there's all those factors that will come into play. Don't just consider it just fighting monsters as the #1 place that you need to worry about. Consider everything and try and be a little more multifaceted as you're planning and strategically going through the dungeon. So that's it. I hope it was helpful for you guys. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for all the support. We've already passed 30,000 views on the channel, which is crazy to think. Please list some comments or questions that you have down below, and I'll get back to you as I can. Thanks for watching. See you.